This brings in a lot of other discussions about like form and structure and, all these ideas that we have from the 19th century and unity. I think in composition, especially in academia, there's this constant interest in unity and things have to lead to one another and it really has to make sense. But then you think about how most people today experience the world and it doesn't make sense that way.
No, there's no unity in your day-to-day life.
Exactly.
It's not like you get up.
Exactly. And you go from different state of minds all the time, from one to another. This is just, a modern life. So why are we insisting so much on having unity and logic in music?
It's a good point. I never thought about it that way, actually, because I'm obsessed with unity.
I think this is part of the issue with music and academia. There are a lot of fantastic things. Both of us spent so many years in these institutions, but we're used to looking at the past and trying to ask ourselves, okay, how can we take these ideals, these aesthetic ideals, and make them possible today? And there are certain things that we take for granted, like how we treat time and how we treat form. So, okay, the materials could be completely different, but then we need to have unity and we need to add an arch. And to me, it's really strange. Sometimes you hear pieces of music that are really radical and it seems like, everything is just insane. And then the form is like a rondo form.
That's how I feel every time I write.
but it's hard.
It's ABA yet again.
And it's really hard to get away from that. It's really hard because I think we really internalize these sorts of forms. But if everything else is different, why do we still have to have these sorts of?
I think it's just comforting. Also there's the idea, especially the ABA form. It's comforting to go back to something that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
And that's also, that's a life thing too, but life on a grander scale. Like it's comfortable to go back to see your parents, or it's comfortable to go back to your home. Or maybe it's not comfortable for some people, but at least for me, it's comfortable to go back and like life on a grand scale, but like day to day, our life is not ABA. Except getting up in the morning, doing your thing.
Yeah.
That's the B, and A is, I guess, going back to sleep.
Definitely the B, yeah.
But I definitely struggle with this ABA thing. Like all my pieces are like that. And only the last couple pieces I've written, I've done A, B. Huh. I just lose the A. I'm like, you know what? They heard the A. I don't have to do A again. Let me just end the piece there. And this piece I'm writing now is like that. It's A, B. And the last piece I finished was A, B.
And do you feel these pieces are less comforting? Because you said there's comfort in coming back to A,
I don't know. I need to hear. I haven't heard them yet.
Right.
Like I haven't heard the musicians do it yet.
Right.
So I don't know. But to me, it felt right to not go back to A.
Yeah.
Like why? Why do we need to? Especially if I spent so long in A.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. I'm learning that, in my material, I don't have to change so much. I can just kind of sit in a sound. And that's kind of like what you do too. Once you find a sound that you like, you kind of sit in it. Not like for 20 minutes, but you sit in it for a longer amount of time than a lot of some of the other material, which kind of goes by in 20 seconds, 30 seconds. But then when you sit in a sound for 2-3 minutes, to me, it feels like I'm listening to, glass or something in a weird way, because I heard all these different things going on for the first 6-7 minutes of a piece. And then I get to minute 8 and you sit in a sound for 2 minutes straight. I'm like, whoa, that catches me.
Right.
And that is a type of form.
Right. Definitely.
And like, I don't hear that in much music. So it made me stop and think like, why am I being affected this way? And it was the form. It's just this unusual form.
Yeah.
That I would not have predicted. So that's the thing. Like if you're listening to a piece of music for 30 seconds, like at the very beginning, they might just click off, but they will miss that moment. 9 minutes, 10 minutes in, we're like, oh crap, I just experienced that. So
yeah, I think that's really interesting to me what you're saying, and I think this ABA concept that you're talking about, I feel like basically everyone's struggling with that. Still our generation that broke so many paradigms, and I feel like we are the generation that really we have everything at our disposal. Everything. It's not something that existed 30-40 years ago. Because genres are breaking down, everything's breaking down. Like this is the time that we're at.
Yeah, we can write whatever the heck we want.
Yeah,
even in academia, you can
exactly.
write
Even in
you want.
academia, which I think tells you a lot. But still, temporality is something that we keep going back to old ideas and old forms about how things go from one part to the other. We still have this axis, this temporal axis, that really makes sense if you want to, understand time and life. You tell yourself, okay, we start this place on the axis and we go here and then we go here, and this is how time moves. Mm-hmm. But this is not how we experience time ever as human beings. No, never,
especially now.
Ever. I mean, this is not how you experience your life. The past is constantly present, and it's constantly projects to the future, and what you're doing right now constantly shapes the past. It's just constantly in this mix. Things are going in many different directions all the time. But then when we write music, we often have this feeling that we have to have this axis. We start here, we go here, and then we go here, and the form makes sense. That doesn't make sense.
Everything in the past needs to be
exactly
developed in some way.
Yeah.
Or else you're not a good composer. You don't know what you're doing.
But for me, some of the insane things that I've experienced in my life, not major thing, but just take the subway from Brooklyn to Manhattan, 2 a.m. You see things that never repeat, but they stay with you. It's like, what the fuck was that?
Right.
Like what? But this is okay. This is a thing that happened. I'm gonna keep that. Yeah, definitely.
But that same train ride at 2 a.m. the next day, you don't remember it at all because nothing happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think, it's a huge question. I think about that all the time. I think that, my ideal when thinking about form is to be able to produce something that is as close as possible to the way that I experience time and memory. I try to think about how I remember the past, how I think about the present right now. What does the present suggest to me in the sense of the future and the past, and can I write music that gives the same sort of temporality? And I don't think it's possible, to be realistic. I don't think music really can do that. But just as an aesthetic ideal, to try and get to a place that is even close to that feeling of being, this feeling of materializing.
What you mentioned is crazy to me, because now I'm thinking back to so many lessons that I've taught students, and the common thing that everybody has that they all want is that they have so many ideas and they don't know how to develop the idea, which I think is important, right?
Definitely.
But at some point, like where you're at, especially, you know how to do all of that stuff, but you don't care about that anymore, because that's not what life is really.
Yeah.
I mean, some things develop, but some things just stay the way they are.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is really the point that, that's when okay, I am past that kind of like beginner composer stage, and I can get to a place where I am really controlling time.
Yeah.
And it's the same. Every student, they have 10 ideas in like 2 pages, and they want to figure out, how do I just take that one idea and make it 10 pages, which makes sense. But in the end, that their 10 ideas in 2 pages is maybe what they will end up doing 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Keep going with composing.
Yeah. Yeah, I really agree with you. I think, it's an issue. I think we've all went through that stage. For me, it was really important to get to a stage where, I spent a lot of time being able to do this thing that you're speaking about your students, to be able to, take this one thing and really squeeze everything out of it. I love that, I love every time I teach the music hum class, and I teach Beethoven 5. So every time I go back, it's insane. It's ridiculous how many times I listened to this piece and analyzed it and taught it. But every time it's still like, this guy's insane. How it's for me, it's completely OCD music.
Right. Yeah. It is obsessive.
Yeah, completely.
In that way. Yeah.
And I think it's quite amazing, and it's really important, I think, for your craft to be able to have this holding hand. To control at some point, to reach out into the piece and say, now I need to do this with this one thing. But then it takes a lot of control to be able to do it with certain things, and with other things to just sort of let them live. And I think a lot of the music that I like is able to do that. So it gives you a sense of a compositional craft, a compositional mind that is leading something, but at the same time, it's not, going everywhere. There still seems to be some sort of a root.
Yeah, I have to be honest, the music that I like, it's still kind of this unity thing.
Right.
I have to be honest. Like when I listen to a piece of music, I still try to follow that through line.
Right.
And, even talking to you now, it's actually getting me excited. I'm like, because like listening to your music too, like that music doesn't need to just be that, like why, like John Adams' Harmona Lear, like I love that piece. It has a nice through line, and even pieces like Andrew Norman's Play.
Yeah.
It's chaotic, right, in the
Right.
first couple of minutes, but if you listen to the whole 45-minute thing, it really is just an arc.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's just an arc.
It really makes sense.
I'm not trying to dumb it down at all because it's extremely complicated music, but if you really just kind of zoom out, it's a big arc, that piece.
Yeah.
And In Vain is like that. Haas In Vain is kind of like that. I think it's just like this big. It's not like this. It's more like this.
But it's a broken arc, I think, In Vain.
Yeah, but there's still an arc.
Yeah,
Still a
that's
bit
true.
of an arc.
That's
There's still a
true.
sense of that. So to hear these pieces that don't quite do this, for me, it's harder to get into them. But maybe I just have to readjust my perception also, because I'm so used to hearing Beethoven and Strauss and Sibelius and all these guys.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a conservatory setting.
Right.
I did everything until 2004, 2016. I was in a conservatory setting, so it's quite recent for me to kind of readjust, especially with temporality.
Right.
So I'm still working on that. But hearing your music gives me kind of like, okay, there's not permission. I don't like to use that word, but at least to see this is another way of doing it, and it's totally valid.
Yeah, I mean, I also grew up in that sort of environment, and that's a lot of the music that I still love today. I have to say that every once in a while I find myself missing this ability to do some things that were possible to do. And if you think about the aesthetic of Beethoven, I would work with materials, and I would say, I really wish I can have like a second version here, of what, it's obviously not a second version, but what the second version gives you as a composer, this possibility of bringing something back, which is kind of, so I mean, there's a lot to do in that sense. But yeah, I mean, for me, this is, we talked a little bit on the way here about how composing is related to the way you live and what sort of part it takes in your life. And I think, at least for the stage that I'm at right now, I really try to think about making music that would be as close as possible to the way I experience the world, just as a person, and if this is how I experience temporality, this has to be projected into the music. The music has to represent, I mean, it doesn't have to do anything, but I would like it to represent it in a certain way. Yeah. So that's, but I really like beautiful forms that just make sense. It's comforting. It's beautiful. It makes sense. So obviously I enjoy these things too. I just don't feel like oftentimes that they really capture my experience of things. When do you have these arches in life?
Right. Never. That's true. That's a good point. And I mean, we've been talking about form so much. I mean, I feel like for composers, especially people that have been writing for a long time, it always ends up coming back to form. Right. It always comes back, because you can talk about these little minute details all you want, but it's that, especially when you go to a concert, it's that I don't really remember specific moments, but I remember like in general what I felt when I listened to the whole thing. So I think that's why form becomes such a huge topic. The further along you get. Yeah. In the beginning, it's all about finding an idea, or do I even like composing to begin with? Do I even like coming up with ideas out of nothing? That's step number one. Yeah. And then step number two is, okay, how do I get this 1 measure, 2 measure, 8 measure idea to 2 pages, 3 pages? And then the next step, I feel like, is figuring out how all the instruments work, getting your stuff played, all the mechanics of that. Right. And then at a certain point, all right, I want to write what's my idea about, in general, why I'm doing this after all that. Right. And then the form, I feel like, is the last thing that gets put into consideration. Even this piece that you can listen to on YouTube, Viter and Viter and Viter. Have you heard this piece by Haas? Yeah. I mean, I've heard so many pieces by him, but then I hear this thing and it's like another 45-minute kind of piece. But the form is completely different than anything he's written before. Right. So this guy who's like in his mid-60s, late 60s or whatever, however old he is, he's still thinking about form. Definitely. There is no set formula he has, even though a lot of the musical materials he uses are very familiar if you listen to Haas. Yeah. The form is what's completely different. So it gives me like kind of this thinking in the back of my head, maybe that's what it's all about at the end of the day. You know?
Well, I think that in a sense it really has to do with our perception of time and memory, basically. Because think about yourself after you go to a concert, what stays with you. So sometimes there are very specific moments, okay, I really like that part, which is pretty cool, and the sound was interesting. But then maybe that's 2 hours after the concert. What do you remember, if at all? It's a best case scenario that you actually remember something. But let's say it was a good concert, okay? Let's say it was something good. What do you remember after a week? What do you remember after 2 weeks? What do you remember after a year of seeing a concert? What really stays with you?
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes you have this vague perception of what really happened, unless you really know the piece well. And then, if you hear something for the first time, it's hard, especially if it's a intricate piece. But you have this feeling of something that took place in time, and how it behaved over time. Like you talk about the Haas, you have this perception of what happened in these 45 minutes. Although it would be hard for you maybe to pinpoint a specific moment.
No, I don't remember any specific moments.
Exactly.
But I remember feeling like this is different.
Yeah.
I can tell you that, but can I say exactly what happened halfway through, 2/3 way through the? Not really.
Yeah, but it's like a train ride. I mean, take a train ride to somewhere beautiful, and you have a 10 hours journey, right? You can't say, after 3.5 hours, I saw this,
That's
and
true.
that was amazing. But just remember, you can say, wow, this is
That's a
amazing,
good way to put it.
amazing experience, and I only remember the temporality of it, the sense of temporality,
That's true. I took a train one time from New York to LA.
Wow.
It's a 4-day train ride.
4 days.
And I don't remember anything about it.
Yeah.
Except that I was working in this car lounge and I met a few people that were trying to figure out what I was doing because I had all this music everywhere and no Wi-Fi or anything.
Right.
But I can't tell you what happened when we were in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not true. I do remember there was a big rainfall.
Okay.
But that's actually the only place I remember, like all the different stop, because the train has to stop
Right.
10, 15 times. But the only stop I remember, I guess it came to my mind, Albuquerque,
Right.
is because it was raining so heavily that people didn't even want to get out of the train to go to the bathroom or get snacks or anything. It was that bad of a rainstorm.
Right.
But I can't tell you what. I know that we changed trains in Chicago, but I don't remember after that where we stopped, except in Albuquerque.
But what do you remember then
What?
from that train ride?
Do I remember specific
No,
things
what
that
do you
happened?
remember if you don't remember these specific things?
I remember meeting this guy that this one guy. I remember he's like from somewhere in the South. I think that's where we picked him up on the way.
Right.
And he just was asking me all sorts of things like, "Oh, are you writing a song?" I think that's what he asked me. I said, "Not exactly a song. It's a piece for orchestra."
Right.
He's like, what does that even mean? You're writing
Right.
a piece for orchestra. I said,
Right.
well, that's what I'm doing. You asked me, so that's what I'm doing. But I don't remember anything else beyond that. I remember the thing with Albuquerque, the rain coming down. I remember changing trains in Chicago. But the rest of the trip, I don't remember.
Yeah, but you still have a very strong sense of being there, So you remember specific things, and you have this accumulated experience of these 4 days.
Yeah, but I can't tell you what happened on day 2.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what day Albuquerque was.
Yeah.
Maybe it was on day 2.
Yeah.
It was probably on day 2 or day 3, but probably day 3. But I don't remember that chronological thing. So you'd saying this stuff about how this is affecting the way you're writing your music. Just for me, at least, it never has been a consideration.
Right.
And it's just interesting to hear somebody else have a different take on it completely. Because at least for me, when I'm writing, it's more like spiritual in a way. Like I'm trying to create something that doesn't exist in real life.
Right.
The music has to be something that's like spiritual in a way that it's something that has nothing to do with real life. Because to me, the only thing I can control in this life, to be honest, is with the music I make.
Interesting.
So why would I want to make it like real life? Because real life is just happening to me.
Right.
But what I'm doing on that page is something that I am doing. But then the thing becomes, I end up in these forms that already exist.
Yeah, I think that's like, the trap. Exactly. That's
you
the
see
trap.
what I'm saying?
Definitely.
So it's like it's a trick that's being played in my head.
Yeah, finding different temporalities, different linearities, or at least, sometimes I really think about, and I think it's very difficult to do that with music, other than other art forms. If you think about, poetry, literature, cinema for sure, is really having this multiplicity of temporalities to give a sense that you have a few things going on, not necessarily in the sense of counterpoint, but in the sense of things that are moving in different time frames, you know.
Right, when you watch a Quentin Tarantino film,
For
or
instance,
something like this,
yeah,
you know, that, I mean, that's one way of doing it, but
Yeah.
it's his specific way that you can't really think what was he copying. Like maybe from literature, he's copying a kind of form from literature.
Definitely, yeah.
But you know that, I mean, when you say in cinema, that's the first thing I think of.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and it seems to me. I mean, I don't know. I might be wrong, but I feel like there isn't an attempt to try and do that enough in music, you know, nowadays, to be able to have this multiplicity.